if you've got a great initiative, as I would say, like third-party maintenance, how you can get it through complex organizations, complex digital. That's really what this talk is about. I definitely encourage questions. There's a conversation as opposed to a download of So if we think about the context of today's organizations, commercial, public sector. So Deloitte says that 77% of CEOs are bullish about digital transformation. Digital transformation is probably something of a nebulous term, definitely an abused term. But this is McKinsey data. So historically, digital transformation was all around taking costs out, improving productivity. But now the views of IT leadership as well, it's going to speed up your product launch, so you competitive advantage. It's going to improve customer satisfaction by huge factor. It's going to decrease churn, it's going to increase sales. So this amazing panacea, something that is an imperative for the IT organization. So this being said, well, that's fantastic. So let's do more digital transformation. So the challenge, though, is how are you going to fund it, right? So again, this is Gartner data. So 90% of IT budgets are just keeping the lights on. They're just the run rate. I was talking to somebody yesterday, CIO, and he said actually they don't have anything. So it's a real challenge. So if you have your boss, your chief executive, breathing down your neck, saying, "Well, I need to do digital transformation. You, Mr. CIO, you need to make this happen, or we're all going to lose our job." How do you do this? With only 10% to play. So if we think about the overall IT budget, the number one cost item in there is people. The number two cost item is software. And in software, about 35% of software budget is on support and maintenance. So I'm assuming everyone's familiar with perpetually licensed software. So typically, as opposed to the SaaS world, you put $1 million in, you buy a perpetual license, you've got the right to use forevermore, and then there's an annuity payment, typically 20% of the annual maintenance, the initial license spend, and that gives you rights to take vendor support and take upgrade. But if we're saying 35% of the software budget is allocated to maintenance, why is all that money getting tied up? So from the mega vendor perspective, so the likes of IBM, the likes of Oracle, the likes of Microsoft, the way they go about setting out the support they offer is very much in their favor. It's not for the end. It's not for the benefit of the end customer. And it's certainly the kind of more legacy, perpetually licensed software. There's a set of problems or challenges that organizations have with the way these contracts are constructed. So the first one being end of support. So what we see, so Origin are IBM specialists, so I'll refer to IBM quite often here, probably by default. But there's lots of versions out there of software, and for whatever reason, the OEM, the vendor will say, well, we'll support N, the current version. We might support N-1 or N-2. But once we publish a new version, then we're going to stop supporting the older versions for no good reason, because effectively organizations have deployed a version, they're perfectly happy with it. They see no reason to upgrade from the version they're on other than paying vendor support. And upgrades are costly. They pull in scarce IT resources, and typically folks don't want to work on this stuff anyway. So there's a whole cost ecosystem around end of support and being forced to upgrade and migrate the software. The next challenge is around innovation. So what we're seeing in the marketplace is lots of the innovation from the vendors is around things they want. It's a kind of cloud migration, moving the software onto different platforms, not necessarily the functions and features that end users actually need and want. So there's a challenge there in that lots of money being spent on this, but the innovation is going in the wrong place. There's a whole piece around vendor lock-in. So, there's a strong drive to convert, trade up from perpetual licenses, which are incredibly valuable, to new fantastic cloud licenses or SaaS licenses in various guises, which are actually the vendor lock-in. Because as soon as you move up to perpetual, then you have to continue to subscribe to the vendor in order to be able to use the software. And overall, it's high cost and the support. So actually, when there is a technical challenge and you need help and you phone up the vendor, it can take days, weeks, months to actually get resolution for all of this money you're paying for. You got all of these problems associated with the status quo, effectively, around perpetually licensed software. All make sense?
Yeah.
Any questions? Any dissent? Yes. So there's a world around third-party maintenance for software. So for the mega vendors like SAP and Oracle, Siebel, IBM, HCL, there's a whole ecosystem of companies like Origin that provide alternatives, provide choice. So the big idea is that discontinue maintenance with the OEMs, stop paying them, look at an alternative option who will provide support for the version that you have, provide great support, step off the upgrade treadmill. You don't need to do that, and invest your time, your money, where it's, I guess, more strategic, what you're really truly focused on. So the kind of characteristics for these vendors, so there's no version constriction. Once you're on a version, the third-party maintainer has the right skills to support you on that version. They'll do so. There's a whole suite of security services that obviously comes up. Important consideration for support. So a whole suite of security services these vendors can offer. We'll talk about interoperability in a bit. And there's a piece around resources. So there's a real scarcity of skills in the market generally, but certainly for some of these older technologies, there's fewer and fewer people. And actually, the big mega vendors have let go of some of the older folks, engineers who are skilled in the software. So this community of providers that can hoover those up, so they can connect the people with the right skills for that software in a way actually which the OEMs can. And then there's a whole piece around price and business case. We'll move on. So just, I guess, to reinforce it. So again, Gartner is saying that kind of incumbent upon organizations to look at this. Now, you have this need, there is this set of waste, nugatory spend in your IT budget, and you have this imperative to go and do digital transformation, save money. It's incumbent upon organizations to kind of look at this marketplace. What I thought was quite interesting, though, was some of the statistics around the surveyed organizations. So Gartner saying 79% of organizations use a combination of the OEM and third-party providers. 14%, only 14%, just use OEMs only. And 7% only use CPSMs, third-party containers, which is quite an interesting kind of characteristic. Now, I think in those figures, there are hardware third-party maintainers, which is a much more established kind of field, as opposed to software, which we've been talking about. But overall, I guess, just underscores the maturity of the market. And from the software side, Gartner thinks that it's going to be $1 billion market next year, which I think is entirely credible. Okay, the business case. So getting on to it. So again, we just use Origin, so we can pick IBM. So this is actually the easy bit. The business case for third-party maintenance, the direct fiscal savings writes itself. So, in this illustration, the blue bars in histogram, that's the originate cost. The red is the estimated IBM cost. So to construct this, like a common scenario that I'd engage in would be, well, what licenses do you have? So So in the IBM world, it's the key part numbers, so the unique identifier of each license, the quantity, and then we can do an exercise to work out, well, what do we think the IBM charge is, and then it's quite standard for the third-party maintainer to say, we'll be 50% off. That's the, I guess, the industry standard. Now, that might seem to be, I guess it's a valid question. It's like, how can you be 50% off? But actually, if you look at the financial reporting of the OEMs against their maintenance line, that's over 95% profit. So it's just profiteering. So I guess it's returning some of that value back to customers. That's how the third-party maintainers can do it. But effectively, there's an exercise where you look at the software estate, price lists are published. You can kind of calculate that out. Now, what's quite frequent, actually, is that organizations will just share the data. Say, here's my input, here's what I'm paying, with the commitment that you'll get to 50% off. So you work this through. It's quite typical. There's no indexation applied from the third-party vendors, and then you apply some level of indexation, 6, 10, 12% from the vendor, and the delta being business tax credit. So quite itself. This can be quite large, depending on the size of the organization, the size of the install base. So direct fiscal savings, no brainer. But that any question? Very good point. Very good point. So it might do, but the policy right now, and I guess, yeah. So that, I guess that's a characteristic of Originus and some of the other vendors. So I do index. But I guess the point I'm trying to make in this slide is just that, that direct fiscal saving, it's self-evident there. That being the case, then why doesn't everybody go and adopt third-party support if it's so kind of smack you in the face obvious? Because this is only one aspect of the case for change, and there are a set of objections that come in the organization which will come on to. Before we go on to the objections, I think it's actually framing the change around third-party maintenance is the direct savings is the kind of the tip of the iceberg. Obviously, that's something that the organizations, the finance folks can see directly, but actually it's the other layers which make it much more of a strategic initiative. So hard to emphasize enough the waste of time and resource, people in the IT department just doing these nugatory upgrades, constantly doing them across all of these sites. So again, going with the third-party vendor, that just goes away. You just don't need to do that. So the cost associated with running the software rapidly decrease. So it was described to me by one of our customers as Chernobylization. Right? So you pour concrete over the legacy software, and that concrete is the third-party maintainer. So just owning that challenge just goes away. So the whole organization will focus on the digital transformation, the competitive strategic initiatives that they want to do. So it's important to be able to frame the initiative in this context. Because if you're just on the direct savings, and you've got, I don't know, if you're paying 600,000 or $1 million to Oracle, and you're getting a saving of 500,000 per annum, not that interesting at the top table. But actually, if you can get out from under the OEM, your probability of being audited once you're out of the that maintenance cycle, that is tails off completely. So having that horrible, negotiation, that commercial wrangle with the vendors, all of that just goes away once you can make that initial move. So the objections. So we've gone into the organization. We've met with your ITAM leadership. think it's a great idea, I think it's a great fit. There's £1 million per annum savings, but then you have to socialise it with the technology leader. Well, first thing, I want to upgrade. So when you discontinue maintenance with the OEM, you lose your right to upgrade. So, if there's a future version published by the OEM, you've no entitlement to do that. So the conversation goes like this: what version are you running? Version 6. What's the latest version? Version 10. Okay, well, we'll download version 7, version 8, version 9, 10. So those are all downloaded, retained, and then you can upgrade to those at any point in the future. But what if I need version 11? Why do you need version 11? I don't know. So this is like a common conversation. So there's a lot of, I think it's kind of a comfort blanket associated between the vendor, and quite often it's the folks who don't own the budget. So you'll find that the people who care about the money are very different from the people who kind of care about having the comfort blanket, the technology. It's about, I guess, being able to frame things in the round. Question? So what if I want to return to the vendor? Well, you can do, right? So there's nothing preventing that now. There are reinstatement charges. So in an IBM world, they'll look at your annual maintenance, and it's typically 3 times the annual charge. So, which is an effective penalty cost to try and prevent organizations from moving away. I think it's different by organization. But there is nothing preventing you going back to the OEMs. But it doesn't happen. And actually, if you do the mathematics around the direct fiscal savings, once you get into year 4 of the third-party relationship, you're still cash positive. So a lot of it goes back to what are your plans for the software. So the software that I guess we're talking about is legacy. It is this classic on-premise stuff running in the data center. It's not the brand new kind of hybrid cloud technology. So there is a strategy point around what the plans are for the software. And if it is the case that there's good alignment between what you want to do with the software and what the vendor's roadmap is, absolutely you should stay with the vendors, and because you're getting features and you're getting value from that maintenance investment. But what we find, or the reason customers come to us, is there's I guess the two strategies are orthogonal. So the vendor is trying to do something like this, what the customer wants to do is something like this, and there's this tension. So I guess having clarity around roadmap is very important. Now, interoperability is a good question. So there's you have a version of software, so you're on version 6, and the vendor publishes a compatibility matrix. Says, well, version 6 is going to work with this version of the Oracle database. And then you have to do a tech refresh, and you have to upgrade your Oracle database. And oh no, my version 6 is not on the new Oracle compatibility matrix. What's going to happen? So effectively, the testing, the compatibility matrices that are published by the OEMs is a statement of what's been tested, rather than a statement of what's going to work. So there's a whole suite of activities that the third-party maintainers can do to test interoperability on behalf of customers. I think it's true to say there's a whole ecosystem around upgrades and around doing this work. So it's in the interests of the SI to constantly be doing upgrades. It's in the interest of all the different software publishers to encourage people to upgrade and kind of stay latest. So I guess being able to actually test that and be a bit skeptical, say, well, actually, why wouldn't that work? Well, why wouldn't that configuration work? That's something that the third-party maintainers can help with. And then there's technical solutions around running things in VMs, and et cetera, which I agreed are not that elegant, but it solves a problem for a piece of software that has a shelf life. It's probably only going to be 24 months. Security. So security is always a hot topic. So the vendor approach to security is patch fix. So, there's an exploit comes out, log4j, and the vendor will work out what they need, what the fix is, but they have to work that out for every deployment of that product everywhere. So it takes time for them to publish that fix, and then it has to go through a change process within the client organizations to push that out. Whereas actually, what we find is that, again, referring back to IBM, a lot of the software, the risk profile is very, very low. So if you're running, I don't know, MQ series, if you're running a messaging system, you're behind several firewalls, you're behind several layers of protection, network segregation. And actually, if anyone is able to come in and run an exploit on your MQ series, you've got bigger problems because someone's in your data set. So it's having that kind of contextual, sensible conversation, saying, well, there are other ways to solve this problem, and you need to look at your risk profile. Yeah. 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 It's a great point. So familiar. So in the IBM context, they shipped this program called ILMT. So it's a metering program. So if you're running IBM software on a virtual platform, you use ILMT to monitor how much that you're using. You don't have ILMT deployed, they say, well, we're going to charge you for the whole physical box. And the ILMT deployment, it's actually big. It's a horrible piece of software. Loads of organizations fall foul of this. So, what's quite common is that there'll be a large organization, you're in a multi-year agreement, come up 12 months, 6 months before the end of the agreement, IBM sales guy knocks on your door and says, audit letter. I guess you guys are all very familiar with this circumstance. But and just creates leverage. And then, you have these silly conversations so you get the initial, the initial estimation of the liability. It's like £200 million. There's no way I'm paying £200 million. But it's just a great leverage to get the next renewal and get that next contract done. And it is, you're dead right. I'm having conversations currently, and people are worried about, if I move from the vendor, I'm going to get audited, aren't I? And the answer is, you're going to get audited anyway. That's just going to happen, and the velocity and frequency will ramp it up. So I guess from the origin perspective, we don't see any increase from people, or we don't see a correlation between you come to origin and you're going to get audited. That doesn't, we don't keep 140 customers. That doesn't happen. What I would say though, once you make that leap and you're off their radar, it kind of melts away. Now you do have compliance obligations that persist, obviously, as long as you use the software, but you're less in the card. Yeah. 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 There absolutely is high risk, and there will, depending on the size of the customer and how much the vendor cares about it, they will apply these tactics and this pressure, and I guess it's about being able to coach the leadership team and reassure. Obviously, if there are just egregious compliance errors, then you are kind of on a high nothing, but that would come out anyway. Yeah, if you get no order clauses kind of baked into your agreements, for sure.
That complex there is no longer an exception. As long as you've grown a certain version of that element. No, yeah, I know.
Mark, I had a question. When customers come to you, approximately what percentage of them have idea what software they want?
Yeah, it's a good question. They have a kind of a fuzzy kind of aspiration. This is not strategic, but they have no well-formed plans to actually, we're a program plan, I'm going to decommission the software in 18 months. Some of them do, but it's, I guess, IT departments are so overburdened, overworked. It's so hard. There's lots going on to have real clarity around what they're trying to do. So yeah, you kind of get those buckets. You get the invest bucket, which is the software that they want to stay with the vendor. Strategic. It's driving driving sales. It's driving the main business. The kind of maintain stuff, which is like email, stuff that if it breaks, the CIO is going to get fired. But it's not it's not driving revenue. It's not driving main KPIs. And then there's the decommission stuff, and it's really the stuff in that book that's the.
People who come through the original door.
Yeah.
Who want support.
Yeah.
So for what percentage of how?
30%.
Yeah.
Like well formed. The other 70% just knows that what they want to do. Yeah. It's a few enough, really.
Is there any supporting sort of documentation or tests that you can take with technology to get them to start to look at the way that we buy support from the vendor, the OEM vendor? Like
a great test is how many tickets have you raised in the last year? We literally had cases where it's $1 million a ticket, because we just don't use it. So in terms of ascertaining value, so I guess, are you using the support aspect, and then are you using the subscription aspect? So what version are you running? How far behind are you? And oftentimes it's quite far behind. It's not uncommon to have people, paying maintenance and running non-supported versions.
People my business as well, because otherwise that literally is down and get money.
Yeah.
And there's the other side of it as well. Is when was the last time IBM actually updated that, or whoever updated that product? So they may have to be on a very long refresh cycle to just match up to what they think.
Or like what we're seeing is vendors trying to just re-platform the technology, put it into cloud, put it in a different context, but there's no feature or functional richness coming through. And again, if that cloud move aligns to an organization, fill your boots. That's what you should do. But there is a misalignment there for the majority.
No, my organisation is running software. I'm saying that okay.
That's exactly it.
So just move away from the vendor.
Yep.
And you guys in your organisation, when you say support, what do you mean by support? So say I've got an and you've got problems with it, and we don't know how to become good.
Yeah, exactly. So whereas previously you would have phoned up the product publisher, the vendor, you wouldn't do that. Instead, you go to the third-party maintainer, you phone that organisation up, there's SLAs, etc.
Okay.
And they would fix the problem. Now, there are some constraints, right? Constraints. So the source code of that product is the intellectual property of the publisher. So the third-party maintainers aren't allowed to change the source code. So to solve problems, we have to do things, apply workarounds, configuration, customization. If there's open source components, we can change those. We can do scripting, etc. So I guess there are some limitations to what we can do. But what we find is this stuff, this legacy software is very, very stable. There's not much changing. So, it's quite easy to do that if you have the right skills and the right people. But yeah.
And you're an
Just do IBM. So that, so that there, I can, if you're interested in which publishers are you interested in? Yeah, I can do it. Yeah, so I get put you in touch with whoever.
All right, then. I'll be really interested in that today. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So there is, I guess, from an IBM context, the software, the cloud's just another computer. So you can move this stuff in based on your current entitlement. I guess it does depend a little bit around the publisher. In an IBM context, there's this concept of hybrid cloud packs and Red Hat OpenShift and how you're going to do that. So I think the point here is that the entitlements that you currently have as an organization will allow you to do this. Now, if you want to move to a SaaS model, then obviously that's a different thing. Right? It's part of the kind of conversations, the kind of the FUD conversations that pop up when you buy stuff. I think there actually. So the big idea is the things you can do. Third-party maintenance, good option to try and simplify things. Right? So it's rather than having kind of waste, inefficient spend here, you're better off trying to kind of crunch that down. But it's time, money, people on the things that you're really kind of interested in. Kind of neat.
Do you
well, I can speak to Oracle, right? So I'm not sure if have you heard of Rimini Street? Yeah. So Rimini Street effectively created this idea, this concept of third-party maintenance, and then they were slapped with an ongoing lawsuit from Oracle. So they were quite litigious anyway, but so they certainly feel threatened that they weren't cool with it. But there hasn't been anything like that elsewhere. The fact of the matter is, yes, it's going to be a $1 billion market next year across kind of those vendors, but it's still there's billions of revenue that the vendors are taking from it. So it's not really eating into it.
In some ways, this is what we already do with systems integrators, because you usually have them as the service desk and then the first line support and maybe even third line support. I manage Microsoft where I'm at, and I battle with Microsoft saying, why do you think your first line support, your engineering service is poor, and we only come to you? You've never been a first line support organisation, and they were surprised to hear that from me. So I'm like, we've been using system integrators for so long. I'm like, how do you get yourself into that pedestal? So I think people like Origina, people like Raquel, who were also in the Oak market organization still exist today, are similar to a systems integrator that is specialised really. So it's interesting that we don't move more towards that as organisations.
Yeah, and it really is. It's kind of a risk management conversation actually. That's what this is. It's not a technological challenge, because that's the easy stuff. So the direct financial lead, it's kind of that risk mindset.
It's also like to say, if the end organisation has already made that decision, we're decommissioning this software asset within our organisation, it is a no-brainer in that sort of context. Why would you continue to pay the originator, IBM or Oracle or whatever, if they're time?
Yeah, what's really this whole thing, people exiting the data center, and all this stuff's on for them, and if you have a hard date, you're out of the data center for day X, then